Hello, hello. Welcome back to our Friday live stream. Today I'm with Flo, our CPO, Chief Product Officer. Is the very formal title.
Right. Keywords.
And today we're gonna talk about building secure web apps with no-code tools. Most of the examples will be with WeWeb and Asano. We'll show you a little bit. We'll illustrate a couple of examples with Supabase as well. But yeah, basically, if you have any questions about security, about scalability, let us know. Yes, Slavo, also called Dr. Flo, because yeah, he has a PhD in web development, code and no code actually. And yeah, I guess Flo, maybe you can get started. I don't want to eat up too much of your time, so let's
Yeah.
focus on quality.
t- Just to make things clear, it's a fake PhD. Huh? I'm not a true doctor.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. We forget it. We always go to hear true doctor. And yes, Slavo, Flo is one of the co-founders of WeWeb, so he kind of invented it, and
Okay.
he's one of the three big brains behind the initial idea.
Okay, so let me share my screen.
Hi, Frikofu. Frikofu is complimenting your background.
All right, thank you.
All right,
Okay,
screen
so let's
share.
start because 1 hour is not much on this topic. So I'm here to tell you how to build a secure web app that scales with no-code tools. So before going into security things and the details, I'd like to talk to you about web application first. So just for those who don't know, your web application basically lives into your browser. So when you type in a URL into your URL input in the browser, so you type in an address, and let's say the internet will return to you a file. So it's often called an index.html file. But in this file, you're going to have many links. Many links to what? Many links to other files. Other files, and sometimes with some, let's say, a file with JavaScript, your application will make some calls to APIs in the internet. And so these APIs will basically return what? Will return data. So the thing you need to understand is that your web application that lives into your browser will download files and data. So one thing to keep in mind when you think about security, it's all about data. I will only talk about data because the thing is security, it's just basically one thing. You only want the correct users, the users with the correct rights, to be able to see and to edit this data. Because what I haven't talked before is this data that your browser will receive, it's a copy of the data. So you really receive the data and you have a copy into your browser. So the user, any user that is using web applications, when you see a data on your screen, you have a copy of this data on your browser, so on your computer or your phones, your smartphones. So yes, so what I can do is to show you first 4 common security issues that I often see when I see some projects. So the first one, I click here, and in here, let's say your application is going to make a request. So I use the Xano to return a list of data, and you see I've got this table with users that, no, sorry, it's jobs. Yes, let's say we have a job board, and this is a list of jobs that you can see as a person who want to apply to the job. So you can see this list, and this address that I type in here, you can easily find it if you right click on your computer on your browser. You click inspect, And what you can do is go to network. And when you go to network, you just need to refresh your application and you will see all the files that I talked about before. You know, you had first a file with a lot of links and you will download all these files. So it's for styles, it's for logic, it's your application basically. But if you let me zoom a bit maybe.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Go through this list. You can see in here, so I've got a list of job, and I can see here job. And here's the request I'm looking for. And so let me do that. In here, you see, I can find easily the link where I can find the data. So I can just copy this link, open a new tab on my browser, and I've got the data. So on some browser, it can be easier because, sorry, it's here. You can just click on this tab and you will see the data. But basically, you could use a tool like Postman or any tool that can make requests and get the data. And so I can see the data that are displayed here. And a thing to know with APIs is that backend developers like standard APIs. So basically, when you see a GET request with /job in here, you can be sure that there is maybe an edit endpoint to edit this data. And so you can just copy paste this one. Let me copy paste right here. And you can use a tool like Postman, or let me use my favorite tool. I'm just going to drag and drop a button in here. I will create a workflow just to make an API call. So that's API call. I'm going to copy paste the link in here. And basically, instead of using get like it was written, I'm going to use post in here. And got /job, and we'll just /1. So any ID, you can try an ID. And so if I go back to my table, sometimes I have the ID displayed. So I can go there on the data, and often I've got the ID display somewhere. So, okay, so for example, the one it's senior Vue.js developer. So it's this one, okay? So I go back to my REST API call. I put post, just /1. And in my table, I had something like title in here. Okay, let's try title. So I'm going to add a field to send data, and I will try title, and I will try something like IQ. Okay, so I click test in here, and succeeds. I like that. So if I go back here and I refresh my page, no more Vue.js developer. IQ.
Nice.
So the the thing to understand in here is that don't think that people won't find the endpoint URL. They will. If they want to, it's easy because so often it's standard. So, and you see, it didn't take me a lot of time to find this information and just to try to edit the data. So we're going to see that after. You need to protect your APIs. You need to protect your backend. So this is the first one. So let's go back here and let me try another one. So the other one is the front filter. Oh, I love this one. Okay, so let me log out here. Let's say you have a web application, and this time, okay, I put an authentication system, so only my authenticated users can get data, okay? So let me type in a wonderful password. Okay, so now I'm logged in as a user, and I see that I applied to 2 jobs, product design manager and junior React engineer. Okay, yeah. Let's say that I'd like to design and engineer. Okay, I can do both. So I've got some data in here, and I will again go through all the calls my web application did, and I will find application in here. Yes, yeah. So I click application, and again I will see the data received. And so I've got 2 items in here, and in here I see what? 10 items. Let's try. Okay. I see a job that I don't know. Oh, yeah, this one I do. This one maybe no. I'm lucky. And oh, that's this one. I like you that I did it before. So I can see data I'm not supposed to. Why? Because this request loads a lot of items. And in your tool that you have on the front end side, you add a filter and you filter the data for depending of the user ID, for example. And you just see the data on the screen, but your application loaded more data, loaded data that could be sensitive. Okay. So when you add a filter into your application, you really need to know how this filter is working. So is it a front-end filter? Is it a filter that will filter the data after the application loaded the data? Or is it a filter that is, for example, in Xano, in your backend, and when you make the call, you will only receive the data, so not sensitive data loaded by the application. Sometimes, just to keep that in mind, sometimes you don't care. You don't care that the user has more data, and so you can create a front-end filter quickly. It will be quicker for the user experience. If you don't have a lot of data, we will get there later. Tell me just if I'm too quick on this.
No, I think it's
And
perfect. And in the chat, if you want to ask questions, if anything is unclear, don't hesitate to ask. We're here to answer your questions. So yeah, feel
yeah,
free.
because it could be a lot of information at once. But yeah, and when you have a lot of data, or if you have sensitive data, the filter must be on your backend side, and your web application should only load this data. So this is the second one. The third one I often see, and this one is my favorite, is bypass access control check. So what it is behind this. So I've got this application again, and you see the endpoint I'm calling is different in here, get user application. So if I scroll in here, get user application, and I go into here, you will see that I'm only this time loading 2 items. So that's perfect. No sensitive data loaded, and behind a notification system, that's perfect. But if you see the request I'm making in here, so let me do that. Zoom a bit more. So you see
Yeah, I
I've got,
think in an English browser, that's the headers. That would be the
yeah, I'm sorry, this one is in French,
no,
and
that's it's fine.
I couldn't change the language. I just checked before and I
Oh, you
couldn't.
tried?
Yeah, I
Okay,
tried. I couldn't. I don't have the option on
nice.
Edge. I don't know why. So I was like, okay, maybe I should download Chromium or something like this. But anyway, so sorry for the French words. But yeah, you can use this link in here, and you see at the end I've got user ID 4. So in here it's in the query, so it's in the URL, but if I was making a post request, I would also see the data I'm sending, okay, to the post request. And let me just scroll down a bit more. You see in here, in the header of my request, I also see the token I'm sending. When you log in, I won't go into details, but you send basically your email and your password, and you receive a big password, a big token, and then when you make a request to the API is making sure that that you are authenticated basically with this token. So he knows with this token, he will know who you are, so your user ID, and if you can access the if you are authenticated basically. So I've got this, and you see in here user ID 4 and say, okay, so let's try something. I'm going to copy paste this, and this time I'm going to use Postman, not only WeWeb. I could do it on WeWeb, but just to show you that the way of doing it. So this is a tool called Postman, and I'm just going to copy paste my URL here, okay? And in the headers, I'm going to copy paste the token in here, okay? Okay, so in here, it was authorization, and I will copy paste that. So if I click send in here, okay, I'm receiving my data, and I'm saying, okay, well, let's try ID3. Click enter or click send, and let me scroll a bit, and I can see that Jane at email.com applied to some jobs too.
Nice.
HR manager.
And just sharing Slavo's comment in the chat. Best practice, if data security is not a concern and if you're not loading a lot of data, do filtering on the front end because it's easier and faster for the user and you're not making any extra API calls. I think that's a really good summary of what you said earlier.
Yes, it is, and Slow is completely right. Okay, so the idea in here is that even if you protected with an authenticated user, you don't trust your authenticated user. They can send other data to your backend to get more data. So you also need to check on your endpoints if this user can access this data. I will show you later how to protect that. But this is a common issue that you just, it's protected, it's just for my authenticated user. But no, you do have to make sure that only this user is accessing his data, basically.
And Kian is asking, how is this user able to access other people's data? Is the auth ID not the one used to filter on the backend? And Flow is going to show you, but actually you can, of course, tell your backend, make sure it is the correct auth ID. So Flow will show you, but you have to be explicit about that.
Yeah, exactly. I will show you later. We are going to protect this endpoint just after. Okay, so let me close this. And there is a fourth one, but I won't go into details to this one, but I like to talk about it because often, if you have an agency, for example, and some clients, they often ask for a dashboard to edit the roles of the users. For example, I want to have a data grid like this and be able to edit my let's say edit this one, and this one I wish him to be an admin, for example. Okay, right. So you can do that, but if you do that, make sure that the endpoint you are calling when you are editing this user is really, really well protected. Why? Because before checking all the endpoints and everything, the first thing a hacker would do is to just check, okay, can I be an admin? Just can I find the endpoint to be an admin? And it will be much more easier for me to get the data. Okay, so this is really a single point of failure of your application if you didn't protect your endpoint that is editing the profile of your users. So make sure to protect all these endpoints about your users and specifically the roles of your users, because if someone can find this and just he can make himself an admin and get all the data, I guess, and everything basically, or just drop all the data, erase everything, and done. No more business. So be careful with this. Okay, so this is if you need to remember something on this presentation, please remember this. Never trust the front end. Never trust the users that will load your web application into their browsers, because they can do anything. They can send the data. They can get the token into the inspector tool. So never trust them. So of course you will put some conditional display on web application on elements and so on. But remember that you really need to protect your data, the data, and the data.
Yeah, because
Okay,
conditional
so
display doesn't mean that it's not in the browser. The data is still in the browser, even if it's display none.
exactly. So before checking where you can protect the data, you need to ask yourself 3 questions. So first, who should or should not access the data? So sometimes you don't care, really. It's a public data. Just don't bother protecting it. It's useless. So really make a list of who should or should not access the data before working on it. then where will be the data? So sometimes you are making multiple calls to multiple API systems. So the data could be spread. So you need to know where it is, because even if you centralize your data into your web application, the data could be at multiple places. So you need to understand what it is to secure it, basically. So it's important to understand where the data come from. And of course, the third one, how the data will be consumed. So is it your web applications that will make all the calls? Is it your backend that will make multiple calls and then receive the data? So basically the architecture of your project. So how will it be? Because sometimes you need to work with an existing one. So you need to make sure that you will be, you can easily plug to it, or you can, maybe sometimes you need to create a backend system just to be able to plug to that system. So you need to understand, you need to know, again, how you will get the data. So if you remember, we had
Let me just interrupt you. Kian has a great question. Like, okay, like if you use conditional display to show or hide a button, obviously the user can see there's a button in the browser, even if it says display none. But will they be able to start a workflow through the hidden button?
That's so a workflow. The answer is yes, but it will be extremely complicated to do it. So you really need to know your stuff to be able to trigger this specific workflow. But what you need to know is that, for example, if he is able to trigger a workflow once, you will see all the calls your web application is making. So in the network panel, when you're in your inspector. So you can trigger the workflow, doesn't care about the logic in it. So maybe you want to protect the logic. That's why you're asking this question. But in the end, you will be able to see all the calls and make the calls himself. But yeah, it will be complicated to trigger the workflow. But get in mind that it could. But I'm interested, why are you asking this, Kian? Okay, so if you remember this graphic, so we have our web application into the browser that is loading files and making calls or receiving data. Okay, with the big internet block in here. So let's split a bit. So in here, when you have a decoupled architecture, like you have with WeWeb and Xano, for example, when you click publish on WeWeb, Web is making a front-end application, so it's creating static files. And all these static files, so the file, if you know, the CSS files, the JavaScript files, the HTML files, will be stored into a CDN. So a CDN, to make it simple, it's a storage that is distributed, so that is at multiple places around the world, and all these files will be copied into all these places. That's why it's extremely efficient, because if you are in Australia, for example, and you are making a call, you will find the data close to you, and you will get it faster. So this part you don't need to worry about. It's extremely secure, because often you will put your data into a cloud system and that have a really high security level. So you don't have to worry about this, except if you are exporting the web application and hosting it yourself. It's another subject, but don't care about this. So again, you need to care about the data that are into your API. So basically, if you are using Xano, you are making a call to Xano, to an endpoint to Xano, so to an API, and this backend system will make a call, so a query SQL call to a database. So basically, you have two places where you can work to protect. You can protect directly into the database. So you could have a line in here coming from the front-end application and going directly to the database. You could do that. So you can protect this in here directly into the database. That's what Supabase is doing. If you are using Supabase, for example, and you are adding some rules, some LLS rules, that's it. Basically, it's you are protecting directly the database. And on the Hexagon side, you are protecting the endpoint. So basically, it's interesting to protect directly to database because you can do it quickly. And if you have many calls coming from different places to the database, just one rule for everyone. But it's kind of difficult to have custom rules directly into the database. It's a bit techy and it could be extremely cumbersome to do it. It's easier to do it at the endpoint level, but you need to work a bit more because you need to be careful to each endpoint you have into your API. So just after, I'm going to do this one on Oxano. I will protect directly from here because I know that the database on Oxano can be reached. Only the backend system into Xano can reach the database. So I only need to protect this part.
I'll just interrupt you a second because Kian answered his use case is that only certain people should be able to sign up for something based on their role. So if they're in that role, a button shows to let them sign up. But if they don't have that role, then the button is hidden. So that's why he was wondering if they could still trigger the workflow and sign up. If a hacker would be able to trigger the workflow and sign up.
Okay. So yes, he could find the link to try to make a call. So basically you always need to add two protection. One for the front end, so for the user experience, so you don't have the button displayed on your web application, and again into your at the API level because you can find the link. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's go on. So let's go back to this endpoint. So I'm authenticated. I'm only seeing these two items. So these two applications. And if you remember, I was passing the user ID 4 into the request. So let's go to Xano in here. Going to API in here, and in here I've got the endpoint, get user applications. So if I go there, let me zoom a bit. So on Xano, you have three big blocks. So the first block is input. So you can send data. So this one is waiting for a user ID, for example. Okay. And then this is the logical part into Xano. So you can add calls and manipulate data and so on. And then you are returning an answer, so data. Okay. So in here, you can see in authentication, sorry, this endpoint is protected. So you know what? Let's go back to, if you remember, I had a list of jobs. Oh, let me go back to that book. This one, unrestricted user access. So I've got a list of jobs in here. So if I wanted to protect that one, I could go in here, find my endpoint. Okay, this one. So to query all jobs, so I can run and debug in here and get the data. And in Xano, you see, it's a public endpoint. It's in here. So make sure to audit all your endpoints and first just make them private. Okay, user authentication in here. I click save. And now, if I'm refreshing in here, no more data. I can't access the data anymore. If I click inspect again in here and go to network, okay, let me refresh again. And you see job is red. You need to be authenticated. So first thing to do, just put a door, protect your data. Okay, let me make it public again because I need this endpoint somewhere. Okay, so let's go back to the get user application in here. Okay, so I protected in here. If you remember, if I run and debug here, in Xano, you can simulate a call with an authenticated user. Okay, and I was asking for the user ID 4. So what I want to do is, if I'm asking for the ID 3 and I'm trying to get this data as an ID 4 user, I shouldn't be able to get the data. So in Xano, what you can do, you can click Add in here, and you can go to utility functions. And in utility function, you will find precondition. Click on it. So it's here. And you need to do this precondition before querying your database. So I click here, and in this button, I will define my rule. Okay. So what do I want? If you remember, I told you with the token that the backend system could, please. The backend system could decode this token and get the user ID that is asking for this data. And so in Xano, you can go to this auth tab in here. Okay, you can click auth, and you can click on ID in here. Okay, so this ID is the ID of the user that is trying to get the data. Okay, so what I want is to have this ID equal to the ID. Okay, the ID that I'm asking, the data from the user I'm asking for. So the user ID, this one is this one that I have into the input. So I need to make sure this one I'm asking for the user 4 with the ID 4. I need to make sure that I'm logged as the ID 4. So that's what I'm asking here. I click save, and I can customize the result. So sorry, not sorry. Or maybe, yeah, okay, I can do that. An error type, unauthorized. Okay, I click save. And now, if I go back to Postman in here, and I'm asking for the user 3, okay, and my token is for user 4. I think I was user 4. Let me check. Let me go to the database. I can go to users, and I was logged as Florian at web.io, and it's ID 4. So, okay, so I shouldn't be able to see Jane data. So let's go back to Postman. I click send. Sorry, not sorry.
Very nice. And Slavo is saying that's a really good point, actually. When you add a new table to Xano and let Xano add the default CRUD endpoints, so the post, the edit, or delete, if you let when Xano adds those default endpoints to the table, the endpoints are public by default. So you need to make sure you log them up as soon as possible. And to come back to Kian's to what we told Kian before, you need to be explicit about locking activating authentication and then adding that precondition to make sure that the user who is making the request is making a request for themselves and not trying to request someone else's data. And Kian is asking, is using precondition better than filtering the user list by auth ID?
Yes, you're right. I did that for a purpose. Okay. Thank you, Kian, for the transition. Sorry, it's not for this. Okay, here. So let me go back to the API. That's a really, really nice point. So in here, in the end, if I just wanted to return the user jobs, I could remove this one as the input, and just in here, when I query, filter my query only with the user ID. So not give the possibility to ask for another user data. And if I did it, it's because sometimes, so first, intuitively, you will do that. So it will be okay. But sometimes someone is asking, oh, I'd like to be able to edit the users I'm managing. So because I'm an admin. So it's easy for you to just add an input in here. And instead of using in here user ID, host ID, so in here I could, instead of using user ID as Kian is saying that I could in here use the host ID. And ta-da, it's okay. But if you're using the data coming from an input in here, indeed, you will, in that case, you need to add a precondition. And the nice way is that you can also add more complex rules. So for example, if I want to protect this endpoint for specific users with a specific roles, I will need to make one call before this. So I will need to get more data about my user, because if you remember, the token is only giving the ID of the user, but now I want the role. So in here, I'm going to do get in here, and I'm going to get one user. I will put that before, sorry, in here. And in here, I will do, like Kian said, host ID. And with this one, before I will get the user data. And thanks to this, now in here, so in here, I'm getting the user data, and Xano will put the data into user_1. And if I go back here, I can add a OR rule, and I say, okay, if it's the user logged as the user ID 4, for example, it's okay to get this ID. Or if the user that is trying to get this data, so user1 dot role. So dot role is because I've got a role column into my user. I will show you this after. Dot role equal admin. And so I can do that like this. So I get more data coming from my login user, and I will use this data to add a more complex precondition before giving the data.
And
So,
if you did not need the complexity of having different roles in terms of security, it would be exactly the same. Or does the fact of filtering on the table directly, does it make it easier to hide the ID of the user?
you can do two endpoints if you like. You can do one with only a get user application, and you can then create an endpoint just for admin users. You can also do that. It's basically it's your call. There is not. You will find people telling you that you need two endpoints, and people that will tell you no, just one endpoint with more rules on it. It's developer stuff that they like to debate on that that kind of a subject at least. But yeah, so if I use dot role, it's because I've got a role column into my user table in here. Okay. So I think I'm done for this one. Let me check. Because I'm an admin. Ha! I think I am an admin. Let's check. I forgot that. I am. Let me put back to common. Let me try again. Sorry, not working.
Nice.
Okay, so still have some time to talk about. Yes, sorry, I need to do that because I just completely. Okay. So
I just want to say well done for doing slides in WeWeb. It I
Yeah.
love
I prefer to spend my time on that product.
it.
I kind of like it.
Very cool.
Okay, so what about scaling? So for scaling, basically, you need to ask you two things. So the first thing you need to ask yourself is will you have a lot of data? So as Slavo said, before starting a project, please make sure to ask you this question. You need to know if you're going to have a lot of data, because if you do, you will do your filter differently. You will maybe use another backend system. So it will have an impact, a huge impact on your stack, on your architecture, the tool you're going to choose, basically. So it's really important to ask yourself um, to know the volume of data that you will use. So keep in mind that. And the second thing is my web application will be simple? Is my application is simple, or will it be complex? Or do you have in mind that I want to build on top on it, and it will be more and more complex in the time? So you need to be careful, because the more you build on top on it, the more complex it will be. So your workflow, the number of your workflows will increase, the complexity will increase, the number of pages will increase, the number of rules will increase. And so please, you need to do two things. So maybe first, just document your work. In many tools you will use, you will have the possibility to name your items, to put some notes somewhere. And even if you do that, make a documentation with some information, because you will just be kind to the future you know. In 3 weeks you will come back and say, oh, okay, what I did, and you don't remember. And if someone else is coming to you at the editor to see what you did, for example, you will like to have a document where you are saying what you did. So please document yourself. And the other thing, don't repeat yourself.
Just the
So
first thing is just for documentation, it starts with giving short explicit names to your variables or to functions or to workflows, or a table, the columns, the name of columns in the table, explicit names that people can read easily are already a really good step in the right direction.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're right. It's not, even if you are using no code tools, it's the same issue that developers have. If you have a developer working for you and you just don't name his variable properly and don't put comments into his code, you can just throw this code away. It won't be maintainable. The developers that will come back to this code will just, it will be a nightmare for him or her. So yes, be kind to others, to your colleagues, and to the future you. And I will explain what I'm saying with don't repeat yourself. Don't do twice the same thing, really, because when you need to edit something, you don't want to edit it at all the places you put this logic. For example, a specific logic. Just productize your work, basically. I will show you how to do that, at least on web, but it's the same in
And
Zeno.
Slavo is saying define a naming convention for everything at the beginning of the project and then stick to it 100%. It will save you a lot of time later.
Yeah, it's a good advice. Okay, so yeah, never trust the front, in case you forgot that. So let me go back to maybe to web, just to explain you what I mean by don't repeat yourself. So for example, in this button I used just before, I put a workflow, but let's imagine that this workflow is really complicated. So something like this, and I put something here, change variable value, and then I put another branch, and so on and so on. So you've got something complicated. And you need to reuse this workflow somewhere. So even if you can copy this workflow and paste it somewhere else, yeah, I can show you again because it's new. You can copy this workflow and paste it somewhere else. It's not a good practice, really. When you need to reuse something, please copy this workflow and make it global. So go somewhere, but it's the same for the tools and not only WeWeb, but you have many places where you can. Yeah, I need to do that for now. When you can do that, and for example, if this workflow is waiting for specific data, you can add parameters. So it's like when developers are creating functions and put inputs parameters into this function, it's really the same. So you will wait for things in here. I can show you a really concrete example. Let me do that
Kian
now.
is asking capital letters. Is this live? Yes, it
Yes,
is.
yes, it is.
Yeah, enjoy.
So I can go here in the UI kit, and you will have you can find in here an alert an alert element in here. So you see in here it will include a variable, and it will include also a workflow. So let me do this. So okay, I've got my alert system that is immediately bound to a variable called alert. So if I go here, I've got my variable here with many data. Okay, so let's say I need to display this alert in workflows and with button. It's a really a nice example of a workflow that needs to be triggered many times at many places. So let me do this. I will go back here, go back to my alert variable, and by default, I will put false. Okay, so display false, and my variable disappear. My alert system disappeared in here. You can do that if you want to see it again, because this one is nice. Okay, so I've got my alert system, and for example, my button in here. Let me remove that workflow and create a new one. And in here, I can execute a workflow instead of copy paste it, copy paste an existing workflow. And in here, I can see I have display alerts, and I have some parameters. So for example, I want something type success. This is a test, a really nice description. And I don't want this here because there is a button, and I want to, of course, display it and for 5 seconds. Okay. So I can do that. Let's test to see at least if it's working. And you see, I've got my alerts. And why is it working? Is it working because when you drag and drop these elements, it added in the workflows in here, or not? Is this a joke? Okay. Is it a demo effect?
Probably. We have those
Okay.
on.
Well, maybe I
Yeah.
needed to reload. Sorry for this. So in here in the workflow, you see I've got display alerts, and I've got a productized workflow. So if you remember, I had these inputs on the right that where I put success and so on. And this is my parameters in here. So type, title, description, CTA, and in your workflow, for example, in here, I put a multi some branches, and I will check the type you will add into your parameters. So you can find them into this tab with the lightning icon in here. You can find your parameters, and so I can put some rules for what you will add as parameters, like
So
developers do.
in this case, when you set up the alert system and type, you wrote success. In case it went too fast for people in the chat, that's why it turned out green and all of that, because the parameters are here. I mean the setup is here, the branches are here, but it knows which branch to go to based on the type you put in.
Yeah, exactly. And you can also do the same for formulas. So let me do this. Let me do that. Yeah,
Just
sorry.
quickly on workflows, because we're very excited about adding the option to copy the workflows, but I guess the only reason you would want to copy a workflow is either because you created it locally and you realize you need to copy it to your global workflows to scale to maintain your code better, more easily, or if you have a workflow, if you know you want to create a workflow that looks a lot like another, and instead of starting from scratch, you want to start from, from something already pretty good, and then you're gonna change it and reuse it. But so even though the copy option is awesome, basically what we're saying here is that in order to scale, you want to keep your code maintainable, and having the workflow as a global workflow makes that easier. And I will quote Slavo again because he expresses things in a very, very clear way. Best practice: if a workflow is repetitive or reusable, always have it as a global workflow that you can then call from the different parts of your application. Perfect.
Okay, so just because we still have 5 minutes, I just added a collection. So it's the same. It's the same that like before. Huh? It's a list of jobs, basically. Okay, and I added a table in here, and maybe I could, you know what, use a data grid also. Could be nice. Oh no, let me remove that. Let's. I will do fancy things later in another live. But I can just bind these lists. We'll go quickly do it. Okay, sorry, not this one. To the list of jobs. So let me get the items. Okay, and I will bind this text to title, for example. And if you in this one, two, if you remember, I've got a type with part-time and full-time. Okay. And let's say you see in here, I've got a little icon in here. Sorry, with a color. So maybe I want to have a color different if this is part-time or full-time. So I can bind color in here, and let's say I have a rule like, okay, if the type is part-time, then I would like to have something blue. So you can put hexadecimal colors in here. It's waiting for the CSS value, basically. And let's say a green for in another case. So in green correctly. Okay, so you see I've got a different color in here. So let's assume that you can...
A little bit.
Sorry?
Zoom just a tiny, if you can just zoom a tiny bit, because right now it's a little bit
Yeah,
difficult to see the two
of
colors.
course. Of course, of
Or
course.
put one in red, maybe.
Put one in
Oh
red.
no, I mean the
Yes,
no.
yeah,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
So in here, I've got different colors into my table. And sometimes you have some formulas that are really complex and that you need to reuse sometime elsewhere also. So what you can do is just select everything, copy it in here, okay? And you will do the same in formula, in the global formula, you can create your own ones. So you can get color, give a name, and you can add a parameter. So in here it was the type, for example. And in here you can copy paste your formula. Okay, and instead of using the item.data in here, you can again use this lightning icon here, this tab, and use the type I have here. Okay, so it will say that type is not defined. We'll work on this to don't have an error message, but it will work. So if you do that, you could also do it in JavaScript if you like. It's the same. You can copy paste a nice formula in Stack Overflow, for example, and just copy paste it here. And when you're done with this, you can go back in here, remove this, and go into the formula tab. And
Forgot to
I
save it.
forgot to save it. Of course, save. We almost removed off this button. So let's go back here, go to formula in here. And now you've got this category from project, and I can click get color. And in here, I will use type. And so I can use this formula anywhere in my project. And if one day I need to edit it, I can edit it in here at one place for one time. And that's how you can scale your products in time with when you have more and more workflows on your projects. Productize your work so you don't repeat yourself.
Yeah. And something maybe I would just say in conclusion, because when you get started, it's kind of hard to think in terms of reusable formulas or workflows. So maybe if you're at the very beginning of the project, don't stress about it too much, but just like Slavo said, when you start noticing that you're doing the same thing twice or three times or four times, for example, if you have that a similar table on different pages and you're doing that formula again, when you catch yourself copy pasting, ask yourself if maybe you shouldn't have a global workflow or reusable formula. All right. I think Flo has to run. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to maybe either in the community, community.weweb.io, or reach out to us through the chat in the product. We'll do our best to answer, and we will have the replay of this on YouTube. So don't hesitate as well to ask your questions in the comments section, and we'll do our best to answer. Really, thanks a lot, Flo.
Thank you.
And thanks everyone for showing up. And we'll do this again next Friday. Talk to you soon. Have a great weekend. Bye, everyone.